Luke Skywalker is one of my favorite characters in the original trilogy. I remember watching Return of the Jedi as a child and seeing a protagonist that grew leaps and bounds by the end. One who embodied the classic gunslinger, one who was powerful in the Force, and one who eventually ends up saving the galaxy by saving his own father. With decades of anticipation, I remember sitting in the theater feeling real emotion seeing Luke once again at the end of Force Awakens. And while I wanted more, I was still excited to see the next movie and what an older, wiser version of Luke would look like. Then we got The Last Jedi. Now, I'm not going to bash anyone, and if you enjoyed The Last Jedi, then I'm happy for you. But for me, the version of Luke that we got by the end was disappointing. It didn't feel fulfilling to the main theme of Star Wars, which is all about hope. So let's dive into 5 ways they could have improved Luke Skywalker in the sequel trilogy. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of our videos, please like our content and subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out and gives us the opportunity of creating more content for you. So let's get going. Number 1, Luke should have tried to save Ben. Instead of hovering over his sleeping nephew and feeling compelled to end his life, Luke should have tried multiple times to turn his nephew from the dark side, just as he did with his father, only failing time and time again until it was too late. This would set up a theme that no matter how powerful Luke was, he couldn't save Ben Solo from turning, which would be a mirror of how he saved Anakin. In the face of his own nephew destroying everything he built, he should have felt great remorse, and we should have seen a real struggle of Luke choosing peace over violence, even though it meant he would lose everything. This would affect Luke and make him reevaluate himself and how the Jedi should grow and change as an order. The clear message that Luke should have learned was that things needed to change, rather than the Jedi needed to end. Number 2, Luke should have learned from the Jedi's fall. In The Last Jedi, we see a broken Luke who has become disillusioned with the Jedi, cut himself off from the Force, and is content with letting the Jedi Order die. One of the things we experience in life is failure, and one of the things I did appreciate in The Last Jedi was when Yoda comments about failure being the greatest teacher. Luke should have sought to learn from his mistakes. He should have understood that things needed to change and that he was repeating the same mistakes that led to the fall of the Jedi Order. He could still have sought out Ahch-To, and instead of retreating, maybe he could have learned the beginnings of the Jedi to fully understand where it all went wrong and how to grow beyond the dogmatic nature of the Order. Luke saved his father because he believed there was still good in him. That attachment that he felt towards Anakin is something that is forbidden for a Jedi. But it's also the very thing that helped Luke succeed. Luke should have realized that not all attachments are bad for a Jedi. This could have made a very big difference for his nephew. Ben Solo needed a father figure and someone who he could confide in, but instead, he was brought up in the same manner that led to the fall of the Jedi. Luke could have been the difference for Ben, just as Qui-Gon could have been the difference for Anakin if he had survived. Also, having Luke explore the aspects of the Force and understanding that maybe there should be more of a balance between light and dark within each Jedi. Neither light or dark should dominate within you, only the will of the Force. Perhaps the reason he's on Ahch-To was because he followed the will of the Force, which would help him eventually instruct Rey as he attempts to rebuild a better Jedi Order. Number 3, let Luke trust in the will of the Force. Qui-Gon Jinn is a perfect example of the type of Jedi that Luke should have been. One who believes fully in the Force and one who doesn't try to control it. This would explain why Luke wasn't interested in helping rebuild the Republic. He would have recognized the Jedi Council was beholden more to politicians rather than the will of the Force. This should have been explored in the sequels and could have caused some tension between Leia and Luke about the role they should be playing in the larger galaxy. Some argue that Luke was doing exactly what Obi-Wan and Yoda did during the fall of the Republic, but if we look closely at the characters, there's some major differences. Now, Yoda trusted completely in the will of the Force by the end of Revenge of the Sith. We learn this fact in Clone Wars when Yoda communes with Qui-Gon Jinn and is led to the Wills. In a way, Yoda learns to let go of his pride and trust in the Force, knowing full well that the darkness would spread and tragedy would befall the Jedi, but there would still be hope and redemption if he trusted in the Force. Rebels also expands upon the idea that Yoda wasn't simply hiding and giving up too. He communes with the young Jedi in training Ezra Bridger and secretly hopes to train Leia Organa in the ways of the Force when the time is right. Now, Obi-Wan, arguably, experiences greater loss than Luke. With the death of his master, the loss of his true love Sabine, to the young Padawan who he trained through childhood, the very order he devoted his life to, and the thousands upon thousands of Jedi who were killed, Obi-Wan lost everything, but didn't lose faith in the Jedi. He had a clear mission to watch over Luke and train to commune with his former master. Now, in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, we see a character that seems very similar to the portrayal of Luke in The Last Jedi, but it was an entirely different circumstance. The Jedi were wiped out and the Empire was actively hunting the last surviving members of the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan was focused on protecting Luke and not drawing attention to himself by using the Force. This is entirely different than cutting yourself off from the Force and hiding yourself away in hopes of your order dying out. Obi-Wan did have hope in the survival of the Jedi Order, and by the end of his series, we see him on the path to becoming the Ben Kenobi we know and love in A New Hope. The very role that Luke Skywalker deserved to play in the sequel trilogy. Number 4, we should have seen Luke as a great Jedi Master. Now, George Lucas has commented in interviews that Luke ends up being the strongest Jedi. Now, of course, Anakin was the chosen one, and would have been the most powerful Jedi if he hadn't lost to Obi-Wan in Episode 3. So it stands to reason that Anakin's son would be the most powerful Jedi after him. We as fans needed to see Luke simply show why and how he is the most powerful Jedi. I think one of the reasons why many of us love the ending of The Mandalorian Season 2 was because we finally got a glimpse of Luke Skywalker showing his skills in the Force and a mastery that we haven't seen on screen. While having Luke show off his skills in the Force is important, more importantly is that we needed Luke to be the embodiment of hope and show us as an audience how one can overcome immense tragedy and find a path forward. Luke could have taken all the failure and found a way to infuse purpose in his action, to help him train Rey and eventually help bring Ben back from the dark side. The sequel trilogy should have been a mirror to the original trilogy where the archetypes were flipped. The story should have centered around Luke and Ben, where Luke would be the light side version of Darth Vader and Kylo Ren would be the dark side version of Luke. This would have given a more compelling story and a real heart to the reason we are seeing a continuation of the Skywalker saga. Vader had very little screen time in the original trilogy, but had a huge impact on the story and had a very powerful presence. We could have seen this used to great success with Luke in the sequel trilogy as a powerful Jedi Master. Finally, number 5. Luke should have survived at least until Episode 9. After Oct 2, Luke should have gone with Rey and played an active role in fighting the First Order. We needed to see Luke as a master, training Rey in the Force and imparting his wisdom and knowledge onto her. This would require Luke to be around for the majority of the sequel trilogy. This would have strengthened the bond between Luke and Rey and given us a real relationship between a master and their Padawan. Since the main Star Wars story is about the Skywalker family, Luke should have sacrificed his life at the end of 9 for Rey and Ben so that they could rebuild the Order and secure a lasting peace for the New Republic. This would allow Luke to be the major death and bring weight to the end of the Skywalker saga. Luke was our new hope in the original trilogy, and he could have been the final hope in its sequel. Regardless of what we got, Star Wars is supposed to be hopeful, and many of us were taken aback by what we got from Luke in the sequel trilogy. I feel like we needed a more hopeful Luke that would inspire us to overcome the worst of situations as we put our faith in those around us. This would have given us an incredible arc for Luke Skywalker, and give us a meaningful send-off for this beloved legacy character. So while we can't change what we got, I am excited to see Luke show up in the Mandalorian timeframe, and hopefully we get more time to explore his character and give fans a truly wonderful depiction of one of the greatest Jedi. Thanks for joining me here at Fatherly Fandom, and if you've enjoyed this content, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, and as always, from our family to yours, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.